What would you do if you couldn't shake the feeling that someone you love might only be there for what you can give them? Sophia had it all: wealth, status, and a picture-perfect marriage to Ethan, a man who seemed like her perfect match. But beneath the surface of their glamorous life, doubts began to creep into her mind. Was Ethan's devotion real, or was it tied to the comfort and privilege her fortune provided? Sophia couldn't ignore the subtle signs anymore: his love for extravagant gifts, his excitement about their luxurious lifestyle, and the way he spoke about their future always centered on wealth. It wasn't outright, but something felt off. This story isn't just about betrayal or trust. It's about discovering what really matters in a relationship. Stay with us until the end, and you'll witness a tale of courage, heartbreak, and a lesson that might make you question your own relationships. Sophia's journey starts here, and it's one you won't want to miss. Sophia couldn't let the doubts linger any longer. The thought that Ethan's love might be tied to her fortune consumed her, keeping her awake at night. She needed clarity, and she knew the only way to get it was to see how Ethan would act if all the wealth disappeared. But how do you test someone's loyalty without them suspecting a thing? After days of wrestling with the idea, Sophia finally confided in her best friend, Maria. Over coffee in Maria's cozy kitchen, she laid out her plan. She would fake a financial crisis, sell the house, get rid of the expensive cars, and move into a modest apartment. To the world, it would look like her once thriving business had crumbled overnight. Maria was stunned. "Sophia, are you sure about this? What if you're wrong about Ethan? What if this backfires?" But Sophia's resolve was firm. "I need to know, Maria. If he truly loves me, none of this will matter to him. But if he's only here for the lifestyle, well, I'd rather find out now than live a lie." Maria reluctantly agreed to help her friend. Together, they worked out the details. Sophia would stage the fall carefully, starting with a sudden business loss that would make headlines. She'd slowly unravel her luxurious life, making it seem like a natural progression rather than an orchestrated plan. With everything set, Sophia took a deep breath. This wasn't just about testing Ethan, it was about reclaiming her own sense of security. She was ready to risk everything to find out the truth, even if it meant losing the man she loved. What she didn't know was that the first cracks in Ethan's facade would appear far sooner than she expected. The day finally came. Sophia made the announcement with a calmness that belied the storm brewing inside her. She gathered Ethan in their luxurious living room, the very space that had once symbolized their success, and shared the devastating news: their business had failed. "I don't know how it happened," she said, her voice steady but with an underlying edge of uncertainty. "Everything I worked for, it's gone." Ethan's reaction was immediate. His face went pale, his mouth opening and closing as though he were trying to process what he had just heard. He stood frozen for a moment before rushing to comfort her, his arms wrapping around her in a tight embrace. "We'll figure it out, Soph," he reassured her. "We always do." But something in his voice didn't quite match his actions. His eyes, darting to the side, seemed less focused on her and more on the grand surroundings of their home. Sophia couldn't help but notice the tension in his shoulders, the way his grip on her seemed a bit too tight, almost desperate. Was it fear for her or fear of losing everything? For the next few days, Sophia played her part, looking for signs of Ethan's true feelings. She sold the house, liquidated the cars, and started looking for a small apartment. Each decision she made seemed to unsettle Ethan further. The tension between them grew, but his actions were far from reassuring. Instead of stepping up, offering solutions, or showing genuine concern for their future, Ethan became more withdrawn. The man who had once been her rock seemed distant, lost in thought, and at times, downright frustrated. Every time she brought up the changes, he'd brush it off, but the anxiety in his eyes never disappeared. It wasn't just the financial loss that bothered him, it was the fear of losing the lifestyle he had become accustomed to. Sophia watched it all unfold with a growing sense of unease. The test had only just begun, but already, she was beginning to see the cracks in Ethan's mask. Would he stay by her side, or would the reality of their situation reveal his true colors? As the days passed, the tension in their home became palpable. Sophia's plan was working, but the more she saw, the more conflicted she felt. What if she was wrong about him? What if this was all just a bad dream, and she was overthinking it? But deep down, she knew that the truth would soon come to light one way or another. The day they left their mansion felt like the world had turned upside down. Sophia had thought the hardest part would be the announcement, the words that would tear apart the life they had built together. But it wasn't the words that hit hardest, it was the silence that followed. Ethan was uncharacteristically quiet as they packed up their things. He had stopped offering his usual reassurance, no longer trying to mask his discomfort. The reality of the situation had finally sunk in. Their luxurious life, the fancy dinners, the weekend getaways, the designer clothes, it was all slipping through their fingers. As they drove away from their grand estate and into the unfamiliar streets of a modest neighborhood, the weight of the change settled on Sophia's chest. She had expected it to feel strange, but she didn't expect it to feel so heavy. Ethan didn't speak a word the entire drive. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, but there was a coldness in his gaze that Sophia had never seen before. They arrived at a small, two-bedroom apartment that was a far cry from the mansion they had just left behind. It was humble, clean but worn, with faded walls and creaky floors. There were no chandeliers or marble countertops, no panoramic views of the city skyline. It was a simple life, the kind that Sophia had never truly known. Sophia felt a pang of doubt as she looked around. This was real now. There was no going back. She was no longer the wealthy woman who had everything at her fingertips. She was just a woman trying to survive. And Ethan, he didn't even look at her as they entered the apartment. Instead, he walked straight to the window, staring out at the street below, his face unreadable. The weight of his silence was deafening. Sophia unpacked their belongings in the silence, trying to focus on the task at hand. But as she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them. She had always known that Ethan was accustomed to a certain lifestyle, but seeing him so disconnected from her now, so distant, sent a chill through her. At night, as they sat down to eat dinner takeout from a small local restaurant, something far from the five-star meals they were used to, Ethan finally spoke. "This is not what I imagined," he said, his voice flat. Sophia didn't know how to respond. What was there to say? She hadn't imagined it either. But this was the reality now. This was the test. And every day that passed, the truth seemed to get harder to ignore. Ethan's mood grew darker, his frustration evident in every word he spoke. He began making subtle remarks about the inconvenience of their new life, how hard it was to adjust to this new reality. But Sophia kept her thoughts to herself, watching him closely, trying to decipher what was truly in his heart. As the days wore on, it became clear Ethan was struggling with the loss of wealth. But was he struggling with the loss of her too? Or was it just the loss of the lifestyle he had grown so accustomed to? Sophia had started her experiment with hope, but now, as she saw the shift in Ethan, doubt began to cloud her mind. Was this really the test she had hoped for, or was she risking losing everything: love, trust, and her own peace of mind just to uncover a truth she might not be ready to face? Days turned into weeks, and the reality of their new life began to settle in. Sophia was trying to keep her head above water, taking on a waitressing job at a local cafe to help cover expenses. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a job a far cry from the boardrooms and business deals she had once navigated with ease. Each shift was exhausting, but she pushed through, determined to prove to herself that she could survive without the safety net of her fortune. But as much as she tried to stay positive, it was hard not to notice the growing distance between her and Ethan. He had stopped helping with the apartment, leaving her to do most of the work. He spent more and more time on his phone, often staring at the screen with a distracted look in his eyes. The man who once adored her now seemed more focused on finding an escape. One evening, after a long shift, Sophia returned to their small apartment to find Ethan sitting on the couch staring blankly at the TV. The moment she walked in, he didn't even look up. There was no greeting, no attempt to engage with her. He was just there. Sophia felt a pang in her chest, but she pushed it down. She was used to him being distracted by his work or social events, but this was different. This was something deeper. She placed her bag on the counter and went to the kitchen to make dinner, trying to focus on the simple task. As she chopped vegetables, she couldn't help but overhear snippets of his conversation on the phone with a friend. "Yeah, I don't know how much longer I can do this," Ethan was saying. "I mean, I'm working so hard, and we're barely getting by. I'm just not used to this. It's not the life I signed up for." Sophia's heart sank. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. He was talking about their life together like it was some kind of burden, something to endure rather than something to share. Her mind raced. Was he really unhappy? Was he regretting everything, their marriage, their future, the life they had built together? Or was it just the loss of luxury that was weighing on him? Later that night, as they sat down to a simple dinner, Ethan's mood was darker than ever. He pushed the food around on his plate, barely touching it. His eyes, once filled with warmth and affection for her, now seemed cold, distant. "Sophia," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "this isn't easy for me. I've worked my whole life for the things I have, and now I feel like I'm losing everything. I'm just not sure how much longer I can do this." The words stung, but Sophia stayed silent, watching him closely. He wasn't just talking about their financial situation, he was talking about her. He was talking about the life they had together, and it hurt more than she was willing to admit. As the days wore on, the strain between them grew. Ethan's frustration boiled over in small, passive-aggressive remarks about their new life, his constant need to compare their current situation to their past, and his reluctance to embrace any part of their humble existence. Sophia's heart ached, but she couldn't ignore the signs any longer. The man she had married seemed to be fading away, replaced by someone who was only interested in what he could get, not in the woman beside him. Sophia's patience was wearing thin. She had hoped that the test would bring clarity, but it was only deepening the confusion. Was Ethan's loyalty tied to his lifestyle, or was there something more to this? The lines were starting to blur, and Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing not only the man she loved but also herself in the process. Each day felt like a battle, but Sophia wasn't ready to give up yet. She still needed answers that would help her understand if their love was real, or just a facade built on wealth and convenience. But with every passing day, it became harder to hold on to hope. Sophia had always prided herself on her intuition, and now, more than ever, it was telling her that something was off. The changes in Ethan weren't just about the financial loss anymore. There was something deeper at play. It wasn't just his mood swings or his passive-aggressive remarks about their new life, it was the way he started spending more and more time away from her. Ethan had always been busy with work, but now his work seemed to take him away for longer periods. He would leave early in the morning, saying he had meetings or errands to run, only to return late at night, sometimes looking distracted or even a little too cheerful. But it wasn't just the long hours. It was the subtle things that caught Sophia's attention, that explained late-night texts, the quiet conversations on the phone that ended as soon as she walked into the room, and the way his demeanor shifted when she asked about his day. He had always been open with her, but now he was closing himself off, almost as if he were hiding something. One evening, as Sophia was sitting at the kitchen table, she overheard Ethan on the phone again. His voice was low, but she could make out enough to feel a chill run down her spine. "I don't know, Amanda. It's complicated," Ethan said. "I don't want to hurt her, but this life, it's just not what I signed up for. I'm stuck, and I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending." Amanda. The name hit Sophia like a slap in the face. Who was Amanda? Why had he never mentioned her before? Her heart raced as she processed the conversation. Was Ethan talking to another woman? Was this the reason for his distance? Was Amanda someone he could confide in, someone who made him feel like he could escape the harsh reality of their situation? Sophia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The seed of doubt, which had been planted days ago, was now growing into something far darker. She had to know the truth. She had to find out if Ethan was being unfaithful or if this was all just a figment of her imagination, a result of her own insecurities. The next day, Sophia decided to confront him. She needed to know what was going on, even if it meant facing the possibility that her worst fears were true. But as she stood in front of Ethan, her heart pounding, she couldn't help but wonder if she was ready to hear the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "Ethan," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "Who is Amanda?" For a moment, Ethan froze. His face went pale, and the tension in his shoulders was palpable. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Sophia waited, her gaze unwavering, waiting for him to answer. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan sighed. "She's just a colleague," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. "We've been talking about business stuff. It's nothing, Sophia." But Sophia wasn't convinced. She could hear the unease in his voice, the way he shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. His words didn't add up, and the guilt written all over his face was undeniable. She knew she had to dig deeper. This wasn't just about Amanda. This was about Ethan and whether he was truly the man she thought he was. The air between them grew thicker, and the tension was palpable as Sophia processed Ethan's words. "It's nothing," he had said, but the doubt in his eyes said everything. She had asked the question directly, but she didn't feel any sense of relief from his answer. Instead, it only made her more determined to get to the bottom of it. Ethan was clearly avoiding the issue, brushing it off as if it were insignificant. But Sophia wasn't about to let him sweep it under the rug. She could feel the weight of her own emotions: hurt, anger, confusion, and they pushed her to ask the question that had been burning inside her for days. "If it's nothing, then why have I never heard of her before? Why are you so secretive about her?" Sophia's voice trembled with a mix of frustration and pain. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flickering away from hers. He opened his mouth to speak but quickly closed it again. For a moment, there was only silence between them, thick with unspoken truths. Finally, Ethan let out a sigh, his voice laced with frustration. "Sophia, this isn't what you think. Amanda's just a colleague. Yes, we've been talking more recently, but it's not what you're imagining." Sophia could feel the anger rising in her chest. "What am I supposed to think, Ethan? You've been distant for weeks. You're always on the phone with her, and you won't even tell me what's really going on. You're acting like we're living into different worlds." She took a step closer to him, her eyes locked on his, demanding the truth. "Is this really about her, Ethan? Or is it about the life we've lost? Because if you're unhappy with me, then just say it. Don't drag me through this. I deserve to know the truth." Ethan's face hardened as if he were fighting against something deep inside. For a moment, Sophia thought he might open up, that he might confess what was really going on. But instead, he took a step back, his arms crossed over his chest in a defensive posture. "I never signed up for this," he muttered, almost to himself. "This life, this poverty, it's just too much. I didn't know how bad it would be, Sophia. I thought we'd be fine, but this isn't what I wanted." Sophia's heart sank. There it was, the truth she had been dreading. It wasn't about Amanda. It was about the life she had chosen to test their love. It was about the wealth, the luxury, the comfort they had once known. "I'm sorry, Sophia," Ethan continued, his voice growing softer but no less cold. "I didn't sign up for this life. I didn't know how much I'd miss everything we had before." Sophia felt the sting of his words, each one cutting deeper than the last. She had hoped for a different answer, had hoped that he would say something, anything that would reassure her that his love was real. But all she heard now was a man trapped by his own greed and unwillingness to adapt. The tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She couldn't cry in front of him, not when she finally understood the truth. "You've made your choice, Ethan," she said, her voice steady despite the heartbreak she felt. "You've shown me who you are, and I can't pretend I didn't see it. I thought we had something real, but you've made it clear that you were only here for the lifestyle." Ethan opened his mouth to say something, but Sophia held up her hand, stopping him. "Don't bother. I'm done. I can't keep living in a relationship where I'm the only one fighting for us." The silence between them was deafening. Sophia could feel the weight of the moment settling in, the finality of it all. She had wanted to test Ethan's loyalty, but in the end, it was her own strength that had carried her through. She wasn't going to wait around for someone who couldn't see her for who she truly was. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ethan standing there, his expression a mixture of regret and frustration. Sophia knew deep down that this was the end. There was no going back from this. She had uncovered the truth, and it was more painful than she had ever imagined. The days that followed were a blur. Sophia kept herself busy with work, filling the hours with tasks that didn't require her to think too much about the wreckage of her marriage. She moved through the motions, keeping a stoic face for the world, but inside, everything felt shattered. She had known that Ethan's love might not be as pure as she had hoped, but seeing it laid bare, in such a brutal and heart-wrenching way, left her with a rawness she wasn't sure how to handle. Ethan had tried to reach out to her, of course. There were phone calls, texts, and even one desperate knock on her apartment door. But Sophia couldn't bring herself to open it. She wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. Not when every word he had said felt like a betrayal. Each time she thought about him, she found herself caught between anger and sadness. The life they had once shared, filled with laughter, love, and promises, now felt like a distant memory. What was it all worth if, in the end, the love had been conditional? One afternoon, after another exhausting shift at the cafe, Sophia was sitting in her apartment, staring out of the window. The street below was quiet, the kind of stillness that allowed her to hear her own thoughts clearly. And it was then that she realized something. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't sad. She was relieved. Relieved that she had seen Ethan for who he truly was before it was too late. Relieved that she had taken the leap to test their love, even if the result was painful. Because in that moment, Sophia understood something crucial. Love couldn't be built on a foundation of material wealth. It couldn't be something that could be tested only when things were easy. True love was about standing by each other when the world crumbled, when everything was uncertain, when there was nothing left to hold on to except each other. She had learned that lesson the hard way, but it was a lesson that would stay with her forever. And though her heart ached at the thought of the life she had lost, she knew she was better off without a man who couldn't see beyond his own desires. A few days later, Ethan tried once more, this time showing up at her door with a bouquet of flowers and an apology written on his face. But Sophia didn't hesitate. She knew the truth now. She had nothing left to say to him. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said, her voice steady but firm. "But I'm done. You've made your choices, and so have I." Ethan's face faltered, and for the first time, he seemed genuinely regretful. "Sophia, No," she interrupted, her eyes never leaving his. "It's too late. I can't keep holding on to something that was never real. I deserve someone who loves me for me, not for what I can give them." She didn't wait for him to respond. Turning away, she closed the door gently but decisively. The weight that had been pressing on her chest for so long lifted in that moment. It wasn't the end she had hoped for, but it was the closure she needed. The journey of self-discovery, painful as it was, had led her to a place where she could finally breathe again. Sophia had tested her husband's loyalty, and in doing so, she had found her own strength. And that was something no one could take away from her. The next chapter of her life was waiting, and this time, it was all about her. In the weeks that followed, Sophia found herself in a quiet, yet powerful process of rebuilding. It wasn't easy, of course. There were moments of doubt, moments when the weight of everything felt overwhelming. But with each passing day, she felt a little stronger, a little more certain of her path. She had let go of the life she once knew, the man who had once been her world, and in return, she had discovered a deeper sense of independence and self-worth. Her job at the cafe had become more than just a way to pay the bills. It had become a place where she could connect with people who appreciated her for who she was, not for her wealth or status. Her colleagues, simple but kind, had shown her the value of humility and resilience. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but it was a life she was starting to cherish in its own way. One evening, after a long day of work, Sophia sat at the small table in her apartment, sipping a cup of tea and reflecting on how far she had come. She thought back to the days when she had been consumed by wealth and the facade of perfection. She had been so sure that those things would bring her happiness. But now, she realized that the true joy came from within, from the quiet satisfaction of knowing who she was, independent of anything external. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for the right moment, she received a call from her old friend Clara, the one person who had always believed in her, who had stood by her through thick and thin. Clara had always told her that there was more to life than luxury, that true fulfillment came from being true to yourself. Sophia had heard her, but she hadn't truly understood until now. "Sophia, I've been thinking about you," Clara said on the phone, her voice full of warmth. "I'm so proud of you for what you're doing. You've got this, and you're stronger than ever." Sophia smiled softly, feeling the truth of Clara's words. She had weathered the storm, and now she was standing on the other side, ready to embrace the future. "I've been thinking about something too," Sophia replied. "I've realized that this is just the beginning. I want to do more, something that makes me feel truly fulfilled. Maybe I'll start my own business, or volunteer, or travel. I don't know yet, but I'm excited to figure it out." Clara laughed, her voice filled with encouragement. "That's the spirit. Whatever you choose, I know it will be amazing. You're destined for great things, Sophia." The conversation left Sophia feeling lighter, more confident than she had in a long time. She wasn't bound by the past anymore, nor was she held captive by the expectations of others. She had the freedom to choose her own path, to redefine who she was on her terms. The next few months were filled with small but significant steps forward. Sophia enrolled in courses to develop new skills, took up hobbies she had once abandoned, and reconnected with old friends who had been waiting for her to return to herself. She discovered a sense of peace in the simplicity of her new life, one that was grounded in authenticity and purpose. As for Ethan, he never tried to reach out again. After that final confrontation, he had disappeared from her life. There were no more apologies, no more attempts to win her back. And honestly, Sophia was relieved. She had closed that chapter for good. One day, as she walked down the street on her way to work, she caught sight of a woman sitting at a cafe with her husband, laughing and sharing a quiet moment together. The scene felt warm and genuine, a reflection of the kind of love Sophia had once hoped for. She smiled to herself, knowing that one day, she would find that kind of love again, one that was built on trust, respect, and the strength to weather any storm together. But for now, Sophia was content with the love she had found for herself. It was enough. She had tested the loyalty of her husband, and in doing so, she had discovered a loyalty to herself that she would never compromise. And that was more than she could have ever hoped for. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Sophia felt like she was finally on the right path. And with that, she was ready for whatever came next. Sophia had come a long way. The woman who had once clung to wealth and the validation of her relationship now stood firmly on her own, confident and at peace with who she was. She had learned, the hard way, that true fulfillment didn't come from possessions or external approval, it came from within. The painful test of her marriage had stripped away the illusions, leaving her with a clear vision of what truly mattered. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving. As time passed, Sophia began to take small but significant steps toward building the life she had always dreamed of, but never fully embraced. The idea of starting her own business, something she had once only thought about in passing, began to take shape. She had a passion for design, and now she decided to turn that passion into a career. She enrolled in online courses, attended workshops, and networked with others in the field. It wasn't easy, but every step forward felt like a victory. She had started from scratch, with nothing but determination and the lessons learned from her past. The first few months were challenging. There were moments when doubt crept in, moments when the weight of starting over seemed too heavy. But Sophia refused to give in. She had already come so far, she couldn't stop now. And soon, the hard work began to pay off. Sophia began to land small design projects, then bigger ones. Her reputation grew, and with it, her confidence. She started her own design business, a venture she had once thought impossible. She didn't need anyone's approval to succeed, she was doing it for herself. Her newfound independence wasn't just limited to her career. Sophia started traveling again, something she had always dreamed of but had never fully embraced before. She visited places that had always fascinated her, immersing herself in new cultures and experiences. Every journey brought a new sense of freedom, a deeper understanding of the world and of herself. Sophia's social life flourished too. She reconnected with old friends and made new ones. She wasn't afraid to be herself anymore. She didn't need to hide behind a facade or try to impress anyone. She was enough just as she was. And while the scars of her past relationship would never completely fade, they no longer defined her. She had become stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She had learned that life wasn't about perfection or avoiding pain, it was about growth, resilience, and the ability to embrace change. One evening, after a long day of meetings and brainstorming sessions for her business, Sophia sat by her window, watching the sunset. The soft orange glow of the sky filled her with a sense of peace, a reminder that the world was full of possibilities. She had faced her fears, taken risks, and had come out on the other side more whole than she had ever been. As she looked back on the journey, Sophia realized that everything she had gone through, the heartbreak, the struggle, the self-doubt, had led her to this moment. It had all been a part of her transformation, a necessary chapter in her story. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, she smiled. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly free. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Sophia's life took another unexpected turn. She had just wrapped up a meeting with a potential client for her design business and was walking through the park near her apartment to clear her head. The fresh air, mixed with the golden light of the setting sun, had a calming effect on her. She was enjoying this moment of solitude, feeling the weight of the past few years slowly slip away. As she strolled along the winding path, lost in thought, she almost didn't notice the man sitting on the bench up ahead. But as she drew closer, something familiar about his profile caught her attention. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Ethan. He hadn't seen her yet. He was sitting alone, looking out at the peaceful scene before him, his face softer than she remembered. It had been months since their last confrontation, and in that time, she had convinced herself that she had moved on. But now, seeing him there, the emotions she thought she had long buried began to stir. Sophia paused, unsure of what to do. Should she keep walking? Should she turn around and leave? Her heart raced, and her mind filled with conflicting thoughts. Part of her wanted to walk away, to protect the hard-earned peace she had worked so hard to find. But another part of her felt a strange pull, curiosity, perhaps, or maybe a lingering desire for closure. Taking a deep breath, she decided to approach. There was no turning back now. As she walked closer, Ethan turned his head, and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The world seemed to stop for just an instant as they stood there, staring at each other. Then, Ethan stood up, his face lighting up with a mixture of surprise and something else, regret, maybe, or a hint of longing. "Sophia," he said softly, almost as if he couldn't believe she was really standing in front of him. "Ethan," she replied, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of emotion she hadn't expected. She didn't know what she felt: anger, sadness, relief, or perhaps something more complicated. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, neither sure what to say. Finally, Ethan broke the stillness. I never expected to see you here," he said, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "I've been trying to find the right words to say, but I've just been lost." Sophia raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms over her chest. "Lost?" she echoed. "You didn't seem too lost when you walked away. You made your choices, Ethan." He winced at her words, but there was no defensiveness in his expression, only a deep, visible regret. "I know," he admitted. "I've made so many mistakes, Sophia. I was selfish. I took you for granted. I didn't realize how much I needed you until it was too late." Sophia felt a tightness in her chest. She had heard all of this before, in different forms, in the days after their confrontation. And yet, there was something different about the way he spoke now. There was no excuse in his voice, no attempt to justify his actions. It was just raw honesty. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Ethan," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "But I've moved on. I've built something for myself, something that's mine. I don't need you to complete me anymore. I don't need anyone to." Ethan nodded slowly, as if accepting her words, even though they stung. "I understand," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything, for taking you for granted, for thinking that the things I wanted were more important than the person who was standing right in front of me." Sophia's heart tightened, but she held her ground. She wasn't sure if she would ever get the closure she needed from Ethan. Maybe that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she had finally found peace within herself. She didn't need him to define her, and she certainly didn't need him to fix what was broken. "I've learned a lot," she said, her voice firm, "about love, about myself. And I don't regret the way things turned out, Ethan. I needed to go through all of that to get to where I am now." For the first time in their conversation, Ethan smiled, though it was bittersweet. "I'm glad you're doing well. I hope you continue to find happiness, Sophia. You deserve it." Sophia nodded, her eyes meeting his one last time. "Take care, Ethan." With that, she turned and walked away, her steps light, her heart free. As she continued down the path, the weight that had lingered in her chest for so long seemed to lift completely. She had faced the past, confronted her fears, and found the closure she didn't even know she needed. The encounter with Ethan had been unexpected, but it had only solidified the truth she had already learned. She was enough, just as she was. The future was hers to shape, and she was ready to embrace it fully. The days after her unexpected encounter with Ethan felt like a turning point, a final chapter closing in a book she had already left behind. Sophia didn't dwell on their brief meeting in the park. Instead, she embraced the clarity it brought. She had already come so far, and now she was ready to take that final step into the future, free from the chains of her past. She threw herself into her work with renewed passion. The design business she had started was growing faster than she had anticipated. Clients were beginning to trust her with bigger projects, and her portfolio was filling up with designs that truly reflected her creative spirit. The confidence that had once been so elusive now felt like a steady presence within her. She was no longer afraid of what the future held. Sophia had also started mentoring young women in her community who were looking to pursue careers in design. She felt an overwhelming sense of purpose in guiding them, knowing how far she had come from the woman who once felt lost and unsure of her worth. It was in these moments of connection, of sharing her knowledge and experience, that she realized just how much strength she had gained. One evening, after finishing a project and wrapping up a call with a new client, Sophia sat down at her desk. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she had accomplished over the past few months. The life she had once feared to lose, the life of independence, authenticity, and growth, was now her reality. And it felt like the beginning of something even greater. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Clara. "Hey, I was thinking about you today. How's everything going with your business? I hope you're still finding time to enjoy life outside of work." Sophia smiled, her fingers quickly typing out a response. "Everything is going better than I could have imagined. I'm finally doing what I love, and I feel more myself than ever. And yes, I'm definitely making time for the things that matter. Thank you for always believing in me, Clara." She had said, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the people who had stood by her, for the lessons she had learned, and for the strength she had uncovered within herself. The next few months were filled with growth, both personally and professionally. Sophia continued to expand her design business, and the projects she worked on began to gain recognition in her field. She traveled more, taking the time to experience new cultures and landscapes, always learning, always evolving. But more than anything, she had found a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She had stopped looking for external validation, stopped seeking approval from anyone, and had finally embraced her own worth. She no longer needed anyone to complete her. She was complete on her own. One evening, as she sat on her balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below, Sophia felt a profound sense of contentment. She had tested the limits of her love, her strength, and her resilience, and she had emerged victorious. She had built a life that was uniquely hers, one that was rich not in material wealth, but in purpose, authenticity, and the love she had found for herself. And in that moment, she truly knew that the best was yet to come. Her journey had been difficult, but it had been hers. Every heartbreak, every challenge, every triumph had led her to this place of self-discovery. And as she gazed at the horizon, Sophia felt a quiet excitement for the future. The next chapter was waiting, and this time, it was hers to write. Sophia's story is a reminder that life's toughest challenges often lead to the most beautiful transformations. She went from feeling lost and incomplete to discovering her true strength and purpose. Her journey wasn't easy, but it was worth every tear, every moment of doubt, and every step forward. And now, as she looks toward the future, Sophia's message is clear. No matter how difficult things may seem, you have the power to rise, to rebuild, and to thrive. It all begins with believing in yourself and taking that first brave step. If Sophia's journey inspired you, let her story remind you that your own path to growth and self-discovery is within reach. The lessons she learned, the value of self-love, the courage to let go of what no longer serves you, and the strength to embrace change are lessons we can all take to heart. So, if you're ready to start your own journey, or if you found value in Sophia's story, let's keep this conversation going. Hit the like button to show your support. Share this video with someone who might need to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire, empower, and uplift. Together, we can create a community where stories like Sophia's remind us all of the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Thank you for watching, and remember, your story isn't over yet. In fact, it's just beginning. See you in the next video.